He said I trick him by shaking my head? Really? It's gonna come down, you guys, don't worry. The depth will get to 20 eventually. So let's see where it gets to. Keep going. Keep going. And so now here what I could have played was rook to e8, and this is a move I should have played. The reasoning being that if white tries to play what he did in the game with rook takes, bishop d4, I had the very nice in-between move bishop to f5 here, and now black is winning simply because, well, white can take on f6, but I go king g8. You can't take the queen because then the king gets checkmated with the three pawns in front of it. And after rook e8, queen e8, it's the same idea. Queen e1 and rook c1 coming, and queen g5 just bishop g6, and this is simply winning. So I did see rook e8, but the reason I didn't play it was I actually thought that here white could play h3. And after h3, the point is that there no longer are any ideas with back rank checkmates, because the king has looked to go to the h2 square. And apparently this is still okay. Because I can go bishop f5. Wow. And rook e8, knight e8, queen d8, and I go rook d8, bishop f5, and knight g7 or knight e7. I mean, again, maybe this is okay for black. Objectively, white's down a pawn, but white has two bishops, so it's hard to believe that white doesn't have adequate compensation. Maybe not enough to win, but white should be better here. But I did not see this actually. So h3, bishop f5. This was the move that I didn't see. If I had seen this, then I would have played it, but I didn't see bishop f5, so I thought we would reach the same position, and I would be much worse. So that's why I played rook g8, but then after rook c6, bishop d4, the problem is now it's just very, very bad. Mainly in view of the fact that my knight is under attack, but there's also the secondary threat with the queen and the bishop towards the pawn at h7. So here I go king g7, queen h7, I go king f8, he plays queen h6, king e8, bishop f6, and so here we have sort of a different kind of transposition. White has a bishop and a pawn for the rook. However, this rook, it's active, but it's also passive, and secondarily, my king is not really safe here. So I go queen a5, queen e3, queen b6, and here Magnus actually makes a big blunder. He plays rook d3, rook d1, blundering rook d6, and he was very lucky that after rook d6, he still has bishop d4, because without bishop d4, black would be maybe even better potentially. So bishop d4. And now apparently the all-star move, the golden move that the computers say is fine, is to play this move pawn to b4. He fell for my acting. Wait, what acting? He said I trick him by shaking my head? Really? I just thought my position was bad here. Oh. I thought he just moves his queen. I thought he just moves his queen and he's just winning. Wait, are you guys serious? Okay, that's actually very funny. No, I was shaking my head because I thought I was just lost if he moves the queen. I thought he just goes queen f3 and I'm lost. Wow, okay. Wow. Okay, that's I'm honestly shocked by that. Really? Wow. Okay. Huh. Okay, I'll keep that in mind though. I'll keep that in mind. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Really? Because queen f3 I just lose. Huh. Okay. Although apparently bishop e4 even simpler? I just thought he moves the queen and I just lose. Like after queen f3, what can I develop? I can go, I mean, I can't move anything. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. I'll keep that in mind and just start shaking my head every move. Fair enough. Really. Okay, that's fair enough. He thought I was shaking my head because of rook d1. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. I will keep that in mind because no, I thought he could just move his queen. I just have nothing to do. Like queen f3, queen e2, and I thought I was just lost. But that's yes, I'll keep that in mind for sure. Okay, so rook d1 is a blunder, however, because of rook d6, and after bishop d4, queen c6, and now bishop e4, I play queen to c4. That's actually very funny. Okay. Anyway, he plays h3, and here, apparently at this point after bishop d4, there's this move pawn to b4, which is holding here, because after I think it's holding, or at least the computers say it's fine for black. Very hard move for a human to play, and not logical. Not logical either. So computer gives b4, and apparently black is fine. Not realistic for a human. I play queen c6 and queen c4, and now after h3, again, maybe the computer says I'm okay here after rook d2, and I had a feeling somewhere around here I might be okay, but I couldn't. No, I'm not okay. It's just bad. It's just bad. I thought maybe there was a way I could be okay, but essentially there isn't, because my king is just too open. Eventually white's going to move the bishop, and they're just too much in the way of infiltration, and my rook on g8 is just not doing not doing great. So he plays so I go rook e8 now after king h2. Just very simply, it's close to loss, because again bishop e5 and queen a7 is a threat. I can't really move the rooks anywhere. I can't move the king out of the center of the board, and so it's just lost here. So I go bishop d5, bishop f5, and now after bishop d3 it's just winning for white, because there's nowhere to move with the queen where I can prevent bishop e5. If I take on d4, there's bishop b5 with the check, winning the queen. And if I move my queen like I do in the game with like queen a4 or queen c6, there's always bishop e5, and now there's too much pressure. The king on d7 is simply too open, and it's just losing. So I played queen a4, but this just loses to bishop e5, rook d5, queen a7, and it's just a simple checkmate in one. No matter where the king moves, I can go to d8 or c8 or c6, but it's always the queen c7 with the bishop protecting it, leading to checkmate. So I resigned here, lost the first game. We'll move on to the second game, which I had the white pieces. Let's flip the board. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop e5, knight f6, d3, d6. I castle here. He plays bishop e7, so now I go pawn to c3, a6, bishop a4. He called it the oldest trick in the book. I mean, I thought he just moves his queen and I lose, but I mean, the good thing I would say though is that if he thinks that way, that means that psychologically there's stuff going on, which is a good sign. Good sign. I'll remember that for tomorrow. So bishop a4, castles. I play rook to e1 here, rook e8. Play knight b d2, bishop f8. We end up in this closed Spanish position, very standard, very normal. I try to put the knight on g3, maybe move the bishop out, maybe play pawn to d4 at some point, and we just keep going. So all right, so knight f1, he plays h6. I play knight to g3, plays b5. I go bishop to c2. He goes d5. I play pawn to a4. Idea here is sort of try to open up the queen side, try to maybe go b4, very similar to the last game as well, of the match, where I try to play on the queen side, use this open a file to my advantage. So Magnus here plays rook b8. We trade the pawns. I go h3, stopping bishop g4 here. We trade on e4, queen d1, rook d1 is played, b4. I go bishop a4. Idea to bring the bishop out. Chat, okay, I mean, if you guys aren't gonna stop with this, like, I mean, I'm gonna, like, okay, fine. You guys asked for it, congrats. So I go bishop a4, bishop b7, pawn takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, bishop e3 here. Idea being that eventually I want to put something on the c file, put pressure down towards the pawn on c7, maybe rook c1. He's got an issue with the rook on e8, and also the knight on c6 defending the pawn on e5. So now Magnus plays rook a8. I go b3. Idea to move the rook, but I need to support the bishop first. So he goes rook e d8, play rook a c1. And around this point, I thought that I was doing pretty well. Had a feeling white is better. How much better white is remains to be seen. But with these pawns like this and the weakness in the center, white is exerting a little bit of pressure here. So now we trade the rooks. He goes bishop d6. I play knight d2. Again, got to get the knight away. I need to use this knight to put pressure on the bishop and put pressure on the pawn e5 from another angle. Also, I can play f3 to support the pawn on e4 and create a pawn chain. So this is looking pretty good here for me. So now after knight d2, knight b4 is played by Magnus. I go rook c1. Very bad move, by the way, I think objectively, because after rook c1, the game should have ended in a draw here. I was really shocked that it did not, because at this point what I should have gone was, I think I should have played knight c4 and played this endgame. It's probably nothing special after knight e4, bishop e4 takes, and rook d6, but white remains a little bit better here because of the two bishops. Whereas in the game, when I played rook to c1 after knight d3, I blundered that on rook c2, knight b4, rook c4. There's a very simple move, bishop a6, and everything in this position hinges on a couple of moves. So when I go rook c1, knight d3, first problem is if I go rook c3, it goes knight b2, attacking the bishop. So now I try to keep the bishop on the board, but then he jumps again with the knight because he has knight d1, forking the rook and the other bishop. And so if I lose one of my bishops for the knight, I'm in really bad shape. So that's why I was very upset with myself, actually, when I did this, because I saw that out of knight d3, rook c2, which occurred in the game, that in this position, after knight b4, rook c4, black can play this move bishop a6, which is what I completely forgot about. I thought on rook c4 you would have to maybe move the knight back, or do something different, but after bishop a6, rook c1, Magnus shocked me by playing bishop d3, whereas he could have very simply played knight to a2. I can't move the rook off necessarily. Well, I guess I can, but he just goes back to b4. And he can also play knight d3, rook c3, knight b2 again, or rook c2, knight b4, and the game would have ended in a draw here. But much to my shock, and a very pleasant surprise, he played bishop d3, because now after rook c3, the position gets tricky because the bishop is under attack. You can't really move the knight because it guards the bishop, and after rook d8, knight c4, black is definitely in trouble here, because you cannot take this pawn to e4, and now I'm threatening to get rid of the bishop here. I can also play pawn to f3 down the road as well. So now he goes bishop c4, rook c4, knight d3, again trying to use the knight and get rid of one of my bishops potentially, but now I can just go rook c2 to stop knight b2, and after knight f4, f3, white is probably a little bit better. So g6, knight f1, and now here I was shocked when Magnus played the move knight d7. At this point in the game, I thought that after a move like pawn to h5, that there was very little white could do to claim an advantage, because if black can get the pawn to h4 and create a grip on the dark squares here, he's doing fine, because I can never remove this knight on f4. And so I was stunned when he played knight d7, because after knight d2, which by the way is probably not the best move, but he goes bishop c5, go back, Magnus played the move knight e6, which was definitely not the best move, because now after bishop e7 we trade and knight g4, and now white is definitely going to be pressing for an advantage. Black's pawns are getting forked on e5 and h6 here, and so now he goes rook e7, another very strange move, by the way, because I thought after rook d1, king f2, he could very simply just go h5, knight e5, rook b1, and I thought this was very close to a draw here. In fact, actually, if you look at the valuation, it is a draw. So I was very surprised that he didn't do this, because if he had done this, it would have been a draw. And I kind of expected it, and then he didn't do it. He played rook e7 instead, giving me this free pawn. And even though there are good drawing chances for black here, white is clearly better. White is up a pawn, and you have 4 versus 3 here on the king's side. Should not be enough to win objectively, but there are chances. So I go king h2, get the king to a safe square, rook b7. I come back to guard the pawn. If I go rook a5 to try and take advantage of rook b4 with rook a7, winning this pawn, unfortunately black can play the move knight to c2, take with the knight, guard the pawn, and also not cede the 7th rank either, because his rook guards all the critical squares. So because of that, dead draw means something that you'll draw 100 times out of 100. This is something that will be a draw with correct play, but it's not. You still have to find some correct moves. So rook b7, rook c4. Now Magnus plays g5. I go knight e3, king g6. Again, the big problem with this endgame, by the way, is that I can never trade the knights. If I go knight c2 and we trade and we reach this endgame, you'll see it's rook and 4 versus rook and 3, and this is actually a draw here. This is a theoretical draw, and I would say Magnus and I, if we had this position with either color, Magnus is white or I'm white, we're going to draw this, I would say, maybe not 100% of the time, but like 95% of the time, because it's just so stale and dry. So that's the big issue that I have here. So I go king g3, rook a7, have to trade sooner or later, because otherwise black's going to infiltrate with the rook, and the knight is going to just start hopping. So I go knight c2, we trade, he goes rook a4, I go rook b2. Of course, if I go rook c4 here to guard from the side, he goes c5, and when I take, he just takes, and again, same thing, 4 versus 3, theoretical draw, game is over. So I go rook b2 here, he goes rook a3, I go king f2, king h5, which by the way is an insane move here. At this point in the game, I think if black goes king f7, I'm not really sure how white can progress here. I think this is, I think the best I can do is, again, get this 4 versus 3, but as I've pointed out many times, it's a draw. So when Magnus went king h5, this is an insane move, because now after rook c2, he has to go back. He can't go rook b3, because when I take, if he takes the pawn, he actually loses this pawn now, because he brought the king too far. So after rook c2 he goes rook a6. Now after king e2, position I think is objectively lost here. Maybe it's not lost, but it's very, very bad at this point for black. Maybe it's still a draw because the engine evaluation is plus 1.09, so it's not saying it's completely over, but it's very, very tricky and very hard to play. So he goes king h4, I go king d3, king g3, king c4. Again, my pawns support each other, 1 2 3 4, they all support, and my rook guards the pawn. So now I can use my king, the free hand, to come in and try to win the pawns here. So he goes rook a1, I go king c5, rook b1. Yeah, at this point it is a theoretical win, I think. I go rook e2. Strange move, I don't know why I did this. I could have gone king d6 to save a move, but it all leads to the same thing. So I go here, takes, I take, king f4, rook c2, c5, and this is where I blunder the game away. I play this very bad move, rook to c3. What I have to play here is king to e6, and after king e6, the position is a theoretical win. The main reason being that what my next couple of moves are going to be is after c4, I go rook c3, and the idea is, or wait, no, not rook c3, I go king d5, threatening to win this pawn on c4, and if I take with the rook on c, or sorry, not if I take with the rook, black plays rook a4. What I do here is I go rook takes c4, so he can't take, and then when he goes rook a2, I can go, I believe I go pawn to g3, king g3, king e5, and this is completely winning. Yeah, this is a win by force. I know that the computer engine doesn't give it, but it was completely winning. What I should have done was in this position. I also can take the pawn as well. But if I take, yeah, I take the pawn, he checks, I go here, rook b2, and it's the same thing I think with or it's not. I guess I have to go king e6 here. And it should be winning because if black takes the pawn, I take this one, and when he takes, I go king f5, and this is again a theoretical win. Rook a5, rook a3. No, rook c3 was not a slip. I just forgot he could check on b6. I just forgot he had that check. So it was not a mouse slip. I just forgot. So if I get this, it's winning. So this was really tragic because if I play rook takes c5, or if I go king e6, king d5, both variations are winning by force, whereas in the game I just completely forgot. I played rook c3. Same idea, by the way, to play g3, but I forgot he could throw in this rook b6 check first, and then when the king goes away, he comes down. And the difference is my king is not near this pawn anymore from either side, and so now g3 does nothing. So rook c5 was not the only move that was winning. King e6 was also winning by force. But I blunder this, and now the rest is just, again, straightforward. Basically, it's one tempo is the difference here. If it's my move and I play rook e5, I win the game, but it's black's move, so after rook g3, the game just ends in a draw. So we just trade everything down. Very unfortunate miss for sure, but, you know, it was all around a weird game, and it's what it is. So unfortunately I drew the second game. So third game, pretty much a nothing burger, not a whole lot to talk about. We played literally this same Berlin line that we drew in the second game of second or third game, I don't remember which day it was, but we played this exact same repetition line that we had earlier in the event. I had a feeling Magnus might do this because apparently he wasn't feeling very well. And I considered maybe trying to go for it with black, but it felt like it wasn't the right choice. I've been getting good positions with white, and so I thought it was better to play the one game with white rather than to take the risk with black and potentially walk into some preparation and lose the match in 3 games. So that's why I thought it made sense to do that. So let's move on to the fourth game. Behind 2-1, obviously a must-win game to finish. Finish the match. So I played e4. Magnus plays e5. I go knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, knight f6, d3, d6. So I switched it up by playing c3 here. He plays g6. Hold the head high and leave it behind. Yeah, I'm not. I guess what I would say about the match today is I'm unhappy because I didn't feel like I played my best chess, and I don't necessarily think that Magnus did. Excuse me. And I don't necessarily think that Magnus did either. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So kind of not super thrilled by this, but it happens. So c3 g6. I castle. 1 second. Ugh. All right. Sorry about that, you guys. Sorry, I just sneezed. So as I was saying, yeah, I would say I'm not thrilled by it, but But yeah, okay, so c3, g6, castles, bishop g7. I play rook e1, castles, knight d2. He plays rook e8, knight f1. Again, very similar sort of situation. I want to bring the knight to g3, maybe move the bishop back. So he plays a6. I play bishop a4 here. h6, knight g3, d5. I play h3 again. Trying to stop bishop g4 here potentially. Same kind of thing. Also create lift for the king long term. So he goes b5, bishop c2. Bishop e6, I go bishop d2. Again, in this order, I don't really want to play a4 because I think after pawn takes, queen d1. After rook d1, b4, I think black is okay because now I don't have time for a5 and bishop a4 because black will push the pawn and attack the bishop on c2. Why did I play into the Berlin again? Because this isn't actually a Berlin. This is more like a closed Spanish. This is a different system altogether. So here I play bishop d2. He plays queen d7. I go a4 again. Now I try to open up the queen side. I also potentially have queen c1 to hit the pawn on h6. So he goes rook a d8. We trade on b5. I play b4 here. Plays d4. So I go queen c1. He takes on c3. I just take back with the bishop. He goes knight h7. And now I go queen b2. I need to put pressure on the pawn on e5. So he goes queen d6. And now here I played knight e2, which I actually was very happy with. I thought it was a good move. Originally I wanted to go rook a6 to put pressure on the knight. So maybe knight, yeah, engine apparently says something like, what's it? It says c4 is good or something for white, right? Yeah, apparently c4 is supposed to be very good for white, but during the game for some reason I thought that there was some in between here. I thought takes b5 he could play like knight e7, but I guess I just take on c4 and I'm much better. So this is a very thematic move that I completely forgot about, with c4 and b5. So he takes, I go b5, so not takes, sorry. So I go queen c1, so he trades, queen b2, queen d6, knight e2, knight g5. And here, much sort of in the theme of the whole match, I was going to play one move, and then I played a different move. Like, I was going to go knight h2, and then for some reason I just immediately played knight d2. My whole idea was to play knight h2 and f4. And it makes a big difference because in the game after knight d2, bishop c8, all my ideas with f4 no longer work. Because if I go f4, knight e6, knight f3 is the only move I can play, but black just takes on f4. Whereas if I put the knight on the other square like I was intending to with knight h2, after bishop c8, f4, if knight e6, I can go to g4 instead of f3. And the problem is black can no longer take on f4 because I trade, and I have this fork with knight f6, hitting the king and the rook and winning material. Whereas in the other line, as you see, with my knight on d2, knight on d2, after knight on d2, if f4, knight e6, knight f3, he just takes. The knight is hitting it from f3, not from g4, so my knight only is this square and not this square. So that's why it was better from this square, because it was hitting everything. And that was my original idea, and then I instantly played knight d2, and as soon as he played, and pretty much I think as soon as he played bishop c8, you saw I started shaking my head because I was very upset with myself for having played knight d2, because that was not my idea. I was going to go knight h2, and then my hand just made me go knight d2. So pretty unfortunate, but it happened. So here I played rook a8, plays bishop f8, I go rook b1, logical move to sort of support against the threat of the pawn on b4. He goes bishop d7, I play rook a6, rook a8, we trade, I go h4, knight e6, knight f3. And actually at this point I was starting to get optimistic again, because even though black is probably better, there is pressure and there are ideas with bishop b3, because after bishop g7, bishop b3, knight cd4, I take and go f4, and now it gets very complicated because I have an active bishop. This pawn is weak. I can always play e5. His king is a little bit airy as well, so even though I think black is still okay here, it gets very sharp and aggressive. So he plays bishop g4, I go e5, again close the diagonal down so I can take the pawn, queen e7, play knight d4, he goes queen takes h4, I play rook c1, and again, much like earlier in the game, again, I immediately, I missed something. Like, my original instinct was to go queen f2, and white is better, and then I saw it, I'm like, oh, well, I can play rook c1, and I just I just threaten the pawn, and I can go queen f2 next move, basically, with my next move, and then I'm still hitting the pawn. So what I should have done was just gone queen f2 right away, and maybe after queen d8, black is okay, but the game goes on, and there's a lot of play left in the position. Whereas in the game, when I played rook c1, as soon as Magnus goes rook d8, the whole thing is gone altogether. I still could have made a draw probably. I mean, I could have played bishop f7, king f7, queen b3, king f8, rook c7, but there's a very simple queen e1, king h2, queen h4, just to check back and forth, and the game would end in a draw here. Thank you to Anonymous for buying some mugs and some hoodies. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you, man. So I could have played this and made a draw, but again, at the end of the day, if I draw the game, yeah, the score looks better on paper, but it doesn't matter. You still lose the match. So that's why I played queen c3. He goes queen g3, and now, of course, black is much better. I play queen c7, hoping for one last trick with rook takes d4, because after queen f7 check, king h7, I have queen g8 with the checkmate, the bishop and the queen together attacking the king. So here he goes rook d7, and now, I mean, it's just lost. I play queen c8. I guess what I should have tried was queen b8 and queen e8, or I don't even know what I was thinking here. Something like this. Doesn't really matter. At any rate, I think I went here and rook a1 takes like e6, rook f4, and I just resigned. Obviously, there's just a checkmate coming up, like bishop d4, queen f2. There are many different ways to win. So so yeah, not a great game. Very unhappy with myself because I missed this queen f2. I thought it was very complicated and not really clear, but it happens. You know, it just wasn't my best day ever. And you move on. You're not going to win every match. Emotional analysis, hardly. I mean, what I would say is I'm kind of annoyed because I didn't think Magnus played great. He definitely didn't play great, that's for sure. But I also, like, I didn't play great, but I still had chances. Like the second game in the drawn rook and pawn endgame, Magnus did not bring the king to the center and make the easy draw. He ended up going for this king h5, king h4, which was completely insane instead. So when I look at it from that standpoint, the fact that I still had chances, despite the fact that I didn't play well, I'm very optimistic for tomorrow, certainly. But it's upsetting because I would say on the other days when I didn't win the match, I would say that Magnus played better. He found some very, very good moves. I didn't necessarily feel like he found that many great moves. He found knight takes the rook c5, knight g7, which he deserves a lot of credit for in the first game. But other than that, I felt that I kept it pretty level, and then it was just like in the critical moments, I just didn't play the right moves. And in many cases, that's what it comes down to, but it's still frustrating for sure. So it is what it is. It's still 3-3, and tomorrow is going to be the 7th and final match, thankfully. And just got to play good chess, keep it rolling, and we go from there. So, you know, I'm not thrilled, but it is 3-3, and it's a best of one, basically best of 4 games match. And what I would argue overall is that in general terms, if you base it on the accuracy, you would think over the longer term, more and more matches, Magnus should be the favorite. Objectively, on paper, he does tend to play more precisely. So the fact that we're down to fewer games where precision is less likely to play a role, certainly I feel very good about my chances tomorrow, and just have to play well. I would say, yeah, it's 50-50. It's definitely 50-50 tomorrow, and best of 7. So less games, I would say, again, on paper, mathematically, it gives me a better chances in general, so just got to play well. And we just move on to the match tomorrow, where I will be starting with the white pieces in game 1. Yeah, and again, like I said as well, as the one and only the legend Bobby Fischer said, what did he say? He said, like, I don't believe in psychology, I believe in good moves, or something like that. I totally agree with that statement. Just play good moves, and good things will happen, and that's all you can do.